Some years ago, a conservative libertarian Polish politician proposed that in addition to regular civil marriages, it should also be possible to enter into an indissoluble civil marriage, similar to a church wedding. For some of his critics, the mere idea of voluntarily entering into such a contract proved unbearable, and they immediately attacked him as some sort of Catholic fascist who wants to abolish all freedoms and impose confessional state. This is, of course, solemn nonsense. Every reasonable person understands that, first of all, he didn't want to make all civil marriages indissoluble, and obviously he didn't even want to remove civil marriages, leaving only church marriages. His proposition was very tame. I myself have been a critic of his, but on completely different grounds. I pointed out that his proposition is fundamentally pointless. Indissoluble marriages already exist, and they are already optional. These are church marriages, Catholic marriages to be exact, because some other churches may allow divorce. Instead of duplicating these sort of marriage, one should rather demand that the state recognize them. It is pure tyranny when people voluntarily and in the presence of witnesses vow not to leave each other until death, and yet the state later assists in breaking this agreement by granting divorces and allowing the contracting of new marriages. It does not matter that this is a religious ceremony. No argument about separation of church and state can explain or justify this abuse. Even if we relinquish all spiritual and religious claims, marriage is still a legal contract entered into before witnesses and registered with appropriate authorities. Spouses enter into it voluntarily and accept the terms. If the state undermines this contract simply on the pretense that the contracting parties are Catholic and are acting under the influence of Catholic beliefs, then this is pure discrimination on religious grounds, and it is precisely this which is a violation of the sacred liberal dogma of separation of church and state. Imagine if the situation was reversed. Imagine if the church dared to annul contracts recognized by the state. What a scandal it would be if, for example, the Catholic bishops began releasing their faithful from the obligation to pay taxes or honor employment contracts without the state's consent. We'd never hear the end of it. People would be outraged, and rightly so. So by what right does the state infringe here on the rights of the church and the rights of the people who entered into marriage contracts? Some may argue that in the name of liberty, the state must grant divorces to Catholics because no one can be forced into religious practices. A deceptive argument. People can be compelled to uphold contracts. No one should be forced to enter into a contract. This is something the state has no right to do, and the church has no right to force anyone either. and doesn't force anyone to enter into such contracts. But once a contract is made, it is sacrosanct for the church, for the state, and for every civilized person. The left wing always tells us, if you don't want an abortion, don't have one. If you don't want gay marriage, don't have one. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. If you don't want a marriage until death, don't enter into one. It is enough to say no at the altar, to say no to a proposal. For men, it's even simpler. Just don't propose. You can live in an informal relationship. No one is stopping you. I don't envision a state where some sort of governmental inspectors check if you are just roommates or lovers. No one can stop you. No one can stop you from entering into a civil marriage in modern times. I may disagree with civil marriages, but they exist. No one can stop you from entering into one of them. Or you can enter into a marriage in a non-Catholic church which allows divorce. Again, I don't approve, but no one can actually stop you. And yet, there will always be people who, from amongst all the options open to them, will choose the one that is meant to be forever. They will take an oath for life. They will voluntarily enter into a marriage under Catholic principles, only to later cry for freedom. They will demand that the state free them from the conditions to which they themselves agreed, and more than merely agreed. No priest jumped out from the bushes and said, "You should get married." No, they themselves had to make the effort, find a priest and witnesses, invite guests, say the sacramental "I do," only to later turn around and change their minds. Truly, these are the same sort of people who, having lost at cards, demand their money back. Let us be very clear. I value freedom, I value liberty, but freedom means that you choose to enter into a contract, not that you are able to break contracts whenever you please.